Welcome to my class in continuation with Unit 3 Statistical Tools and Interpretation, and we finished with the measures of central tendency, measures of dispersion. We've talked about correlation. We've also talked a lot about index numbers and the unweighted, and today we're going to do the weighted index numbers with weights, with importance. All right, so just have a look. Here we go. Now, as we know that index numbers are specialized averages and they are barometers of economic activities, and methods of constructing index numbers, there are two methods. One is the aggregative method and the second is the average of price relative method. And both of these methods are used in the unweighted. When you're trying to find out the unweighted index numbers, that means all the commodities that you're studying are of equal importance. And there is something known as weighted index numbers. So in weighted index numbers, commodities have are sort of listed according to their importance to those type of people. So unweighted again has these two methods which we finished in the last two classes. One is the simple aggregative method. The formula is sigma P1 upon sigma P0 into 100. That's the index number. And then we have the simple average of price relative method. So what is a price relative? Price relative is P1 upon P0 into 100. That is equal to R. So when we are doing the simple average of price relative, we just take the sigma relative, that is the price relative, divided by the total number of commodities in question. Now we come to what is known as weighted index numbers. So we are going to do the weighted index numbers. Let me see if I can make it clearer. Yes. So this is the weighted index numbers. All right. So in the weighted index number, we have again, there'll be only two methods. That's the aggregative method and the average of price relative method. But with what? With weights. Weighted aggregative method and weighted average of price relative method. Once again, even weighted index numbers are calculated with the same methods, the same two methods. One is the aggregative method, but here weighted aggregative methods along with the weights. And the second one is again average of price relative method. The same method is used, they are the second method, but here weighted average of price relative method. Is that clear? Now let me just discuss the formulae. Let's take the weighted aggregative method formula. It is P01 is equal to sigma P1 upon P0 into Q0 upon Q0, okay, into 100. So sigma P1 into Q0 divided by sigma P0 into Q0 into 100, that's a weighted aggregative method. And then we have weighted average of price relative method. So you know what's a price relative method? It is sigma price relative divided by the weights divided by sigma weights. That's the weighted average of price relative method. Now before I go on to make you understand what it is, let me just talk a little more about what are weights after all. So what do you mean by weights? What is weighted aggregative method? What is weights after all? Now as we've already talked that I've already repeated myself time and again that an index number becomes a weighted index number when the relative importance of items is taken care of. So if you start assigning some importance to the weight, to the commodities, then therein comes the weight. Then you're talking about the weights, right? So that's how then we talk about the weights. So once again, importance of items. If you're taking care of the importance of items, then we talk about weights. Alright. Now to construct a weighted aggregative index, we have a well specified basket of commodities that we take, and its worth each year is calculated. So it in a way measures the changing value of a fixed aggregate of goods. Okay. Now since the total value changes with the fixed basket, the change is due to price change. And okay, if that's not very clear, just try to understand what it is. That under the weighted methods, weights are given to various commodities that are included in the index, because some commodities may be more important than others. Generally, either quantity weights or value weights are assigned. Quantity weights refer to the amount of commodity produced, while value weights is the product of price with quantity consumed or produced. So when you're talking about value, it's all obviously in terms of money, but when you're talking about the quantity, then how much you're purchasing. So weighted index numbers are constructed by, as we said, two methods. One is the weighted aggregative method and the second is the weighted average of price relative method. So let's just take the weighted aggregative method now. Okay, and we will discuss the formulae. So in this method, appropriate weights are given to different commodities to show their relative importance in the group. There are many formulae to construct weighted index numbers, such as the Laspier's formula, Pasteur's formula, Dorbish and Bowley's formula, Marshall and Edgeworth's formula, Fisher's formula. So here we are going to discuss, I'm going to discuss three of them today. One is the Laspier's formula, second is the Pasteur's formula, and the third is the Fisher's method of measuring weighted aggregative method. So let me just see this way. Okay, now let's just take the Laspier's method. So in the Laspier's method, what do we see? We take the index number will be equal to sigma P1 upon P0. Remember what we did? But in this, just remember, we take the quantities of the base year. So sigma P1 into Q0, sigma P0 into Q0 into 100 will give you the index number. So index number is equal to P01 is equal to sigma, this much you know, right? Simple aggregative method. You want to give it weight, so we will give the quantity consumed in the base year. So P1 into Q0, P0 into Q0 into 100. Now in Pasteur's method, just remember the formula. Again, this much, if you're talking about this much, what is it? It is a simple aggregative method, but here we are going to do the weighted aggregative method. So here we multiply this with the current year's weights, that is Q1 and Q1. So here in the Pasteur's method is a sigma P1 into Q1 and it is sigma P0 into Q1 into 100. So here in Laspier's method, what was it? It's the same thing. You take the simple aggregative method, but here you will multiply this with the base year weights. And in Pasteur's method, remember to multiply it with the current year weights. Alright. And now for the Laspier's method. Now what is Laspier's method? It's taking both into consideration. In a way, I can just write down that index number is equal to under root, we have last year's method into past year's method, okay, and then the whole thing is multiplied by 100. Now in this, or you can, just to make it very clear, okay, it is sigma P1 into Q0, sigma P0 into Q0, that's the last year's method, into sigma P1 into Q1, sigma P0 into Q1, that is the past year's method, into 100 under root. So I hope you understood this, the three formulae. It is not difficult at all. If you learn up these formulae, all we have to do is, whenever we get in the next class, I'll be doing the numerical, and in that then you'll understand what you'll be able to do it easily. Now for some questions before I come to the end for weighted index numbers, I want you to pause the video and write down these questions. All right. So these are, let's just take the first question. What is a price relative? So we are not doing the weighted average of price relative method, or should I explain that to you also? Okay, we will do that in the later one. So we are weighted aggregative method. Though I think I should explain that too also, because okay, which I didn't do, I'm sure I haven't done. So in the weighted index numbers, what I left out, we just did the weighted aggregative method, the first one. Let's just do the second one. Now what is the second one? Weighted average of price relative method. So what do you take? You take the price relative. You know what's a price relative? You know the price, what is a price relative? P1, this is it, P1 upon P0 into 100, that's the price relative. Okay, so P1 upon P0 into 100, yeah, that is the price relative. Now what we do here is, we put it as R. So index number is equal to sigma R, that is price relative, into the weights, divided by sigma the weights. Alright, so these could be what is known as the value weights. So here again, let me just explain to you. Weighted index number 2 times, weighted aggregative method and weighted average of price relative method. So price relative is P1 upon P0 into 100. You get those. So sigma, and then you multiply each one with the value weights given. So R into W, that is sigma R into W upon sigma W, and that's how you get the weighted average of price relative method. So I just let's just hurriedly do these questions as I showed them to you. What is define a price relative? So price relative may be defined as a percentage ratio. It's a percentage ratio of the value of a variable in the current year to its value in the base year. So it's a percentage ratio of a variable or a commodity here. Let's just make it very clear. It is a commodity, okay? So the commodity in question that you're talking about. So it's a percentage ratio of the value of a variable or commodity in the current year to the value in the base year. Second question. State weighted aggregative method of constructing index number. So what do you mean by that? So you just have to, so this is under weighted aggregative method of constructing index number. Weights are assigned to various items and the weighted aggregate of the prices are obtained. Okay. So the next one is mention 2 methods of constructing index numbers. So since they've asked you just 2 methods, you can write down last year's method, past year's method, or whatever, whichever method you want to write. Or Bowley's method or Fisher's method. Okay. So the fourth question is name any 2 methods. Okay, we finished with that. Next is state the weights used in last year's method. So what are the weights used? I'm sure you'll be able to say. The quantities of the commodities in the base year. Alright, so they are the weights used in Laspier's method. The next question, state the weights used in Pasteur's method. So here again you can see the board. Which are the weights used? So the quantities of the commodities in the current year are used, right? So the next question could be, how is Fisher's index related to Laspier's index and Pasteur's index number? So Fisher's index is the geometric mean of the Laspier's and Pasteur's index numbers. Alright, so that's how it's related. Then the next is, state the weights that are used in the Fisher's method. So what are the weights used in Fisher's method? Quantities of the commodities in the base year as well as quantities of the commodities in the current year. Both are used. Why? Because it's using Laspier's as well as Pasteur's method. Now another question sometimes one gets is, according to you, which method is ideal for constructing weighted index number? So which is an ideal method? So generally we write it is the Fisher's method. Alright, so Fisher's method, as we see, simply because he used both base year as well as current year quantities, that is Q0 and Q1 as weights, and that is why that's the reason this it avoids the bias which is associated with the Laspier's or Pasteur's method. And the formula is based on geometric mean, which is considered to be the best average for calculating index numbers. Right, and it also satisfies time reversal test and factor reversal test. So that is why this formula Fisherian formula is said to be the best one to calculate the weighted index number.